Mistress pushes pregnant wife down the stairs. Millionaire husband ignores her miscarriage. A pregnant heiress, a ruthless mistress, and a millionaire husband whose indifference chills the blood. This is the tangled web of secrets about to unravel. Adriana Harrington is moments away from motherhood when a devastating act of betrayal strikes at the heart of her once perfect life. With wealth and prestige coating the family's every move, no one expects the violence simmering beneath high society's polished veneer. But in a sweeping turn of events, the darkest of human emotions will come to light. Brace yourself for a tale of ambition, jealousy, and desperation that explodes into a tragedy so stunning it could shatter everything you thought you knew. Adriana Harrington awoke to the soft patter of rain against the glass walls of her grand bedroom. Her fingers unconsciously brushed across her rounded belly 6 months along, and each day brought new flutters of life within her. Wealth and privilege surrounded her in every corner of the Harrington estate, a sprawling mansion perched on the outskirts of Greenwich, Connecticut. She had married Nathan Harrington 2 years ago, entering a world where comfort was second nature and money answered every dilemma. Yet, this morning, an unexplainable unease lingered in her heart, disrupting what should have been a sense of security. The corridors seemed oddly silent. Usually, the staff bustled at the break of dawn, preparing breakfasts fit for royalty, dusting every surface, and polishing the marble floors. But today, Adriana found the hush unnerving. She slid on a silk robe and stepped onto the landing that overlooked the ornate foyer. Downstairs, she spotted her husband, Nathan, in deep conversation with someone she couldn't identify. The tone was hushed and the body language tense. Adriana descended the winding staircase, her hand gliding along the carved banister. Her father, the late Charles Greenwood, had always told her that intuition was a powerful guide. She recalled his words as she approached Nathan, trying to quell the rising anxiety in her chest. A heavy hush fell over the foyer as her foot touched the last step. Nathan turned, his handsome features drawn, shadows marking his eyes like secrets. Next to him stood a woman with raven black hair, sharp cheekbones, and a confident stance that spoke volumes about her place in Nathan's life. Adriana smiled politely, though something about the woman set off alarm bells in her mind. She had no idea how profoundly this stranger would unravel her world. Her name was Vanessa Bloom, a name Adriana would soon come to dread. Nathan introduced her with a casual ease that stirred jealousy in Adriana's heart. According to him, Vanessa was a financial consultant, brought in to help restructure some of Harrington Industries' faltering departments. But the way Vanessa placed a hand on Nathan's arm, letting her fingertips linger, struck Adriana like an arrow of suspicion. Adriana tried not to overreact. After all, her hormones were running wild, and jealousy was not a trait she liked to admit. She nodded politely, forced a smile, and left them to their conversation, excusing herself for a doctor's appointment scheduled later that morning. As she walked away, Adriana glanced over her shoulder. Nathan leaned in closer to Vanessa, whispering something that made the woman's crimson lips curl into a smile. An uneasy feeling followed Adriana into her car, where her personal driver, Joseph, waited. She couldn't shake the odd tension in her husband's demeanor or the glint of satisfaction in Vanessa's eyes. It seemed like everyone in the house was caught under an unexplained hush, like they knew something she didn't. At Dr. Megan Ross's office, Adriana attempted to refocus on the joy of her pregnancy. During the ultrasound, she heard the rhythmic thump of her baby's heartbeat, a reassuring sound that momentarily dissolved her worries. She wanted to share this moment with Nathan, but he hadn't offered to come. Lately, he seemed distant, absorbed in business calls and late-night meetings. As Adriana left the clinic, her phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen, an unknown number. Answering, she heard a raspy female voice. "Whisper, Watch your back." Before she could respond, the call ended. Chills shot through her body. She sensed that the fragile peace in her life was on the verge of shattering completely. Returning home felt like stepping into a different reality. The sunlight filtering through the tall windows did nothing to lift the gloom that clung to every surface of the Harrington mansion. Adriana found a neat envelope waiting for her on the foyer's marble-topped console. Inside was a note written in an elegant, looping script. "Be careful, some secrets can kill." A spike of alarm shot through her. Was this a joke? A threat? Unable to confront Nathan about it, directly he had been so distant lately, she tucked the note into her purse, determined to keep a watchful eye on everything around her. That evening, she dined alone at a massive walnut table in the formal dining room. Nathan had sent a text that he would be working late with Vanessa. Adriana picked at her meal, feeling both worry and anger swirl within her. She replayed her father's old advice, never make assumptions without fact. But all she saw were red flags. Seeking comfort, she decided to check on the family library, a place where she often found solace. Rows upon rows of leather-bound tomes offered an escape. But as she stepped inside, a figure by the tall window startled her. It was Lucy Harrington, Nathan's mother, a stern woman who seldom offered a friendly smile. Lucy regarded Adriana with a look of cool disinterest. "Does my son know you're up and about at this hour?" Lucy's voice was as cold as her demeanor. Adriana tried to suppress the shiver that crawled up her spine. She explained she was just looking for something to read, but Lucy's gaze flickered with an unspoken question, almost as if she suspected Adriana of prying. The tension in Lucy's stare did nothing to calm Adriana's nerves. Quietly, Adriana wondered if Lucy had any idea about the new woman in Nathan's life, or if she had even orchestrated it. Lucy Harrington's formidable presence in the household was well known. She was protective of her son, fiercely loyal to the Harrington legacy. Yet, she was never warm with Adriana. Since the wedding, Lucy had voiced subtle disapproval, citing how Adriana came from old money that had nearly gone bankrupt after her father's death. Lucy feared Adriana was more of a burden than an asset, a woman who might dilute the Harrington fortune rather than enhance it. That night in the library, Lucy's narrow eyes pinned Adriana in place. "Your pregnancy is bringing a new heir into the family. It's not something to be taken lightly," Lucy said, her voice tinged with an almost threatening undertone. Adriana swallowed, feeling the weight of Lucy's expectations. Could Lucy somehow be part of the tension swirling around her marriage? The older woman's protective nature might fuel dangerous decisions, especially if she perceived Adriana as unfit or inconvenient. In the days that followed, Lucy made sporadic appearances, always observing Adriana with silent judgment. Meanwhile, Vanessa Bloom's presence in Nathan's life became increasingly obvious. Instead of discussing financial reports in the office, Vanessa visited the estate, sometimes late into the evening. Whenever Adriana tried to corner Nathan for a conversation about it, he waved off her concerns. "You're imagining things," he said one night, dismissing the look of despair on Adriana's face. "Vanessa is a consultant. She's helping me fix some dire situations in the company." But Adriana couldn't ignore how Vanessa looked at Nathan, how she casually invaded their private spaces, leaving her perfume lingering in the foyer or a scarf thrown over the back of a chair in the living room. It felt invasive, like she was carving out her territory, making herself at home. In these mounting moments, seeds of distrust flourished, painting Adriana's once peaceful world in sinister shades of doubt. The final straw came on a stormy afternoon when Adriana, feeling uneasy at home, decided to pay a surprise visit to Harrington Industries. She wanted to see Nathan in his corporate domain, perhaps bring him lunch, and attempt to rekindle a spark of affection. With the help of her childhood friend, Serena Parker, she arranged a quiet entrance into the building, hoping to avoid turning heads. While waiting by the executive elevators, Adriana noticed Vanessa stepping out of Nathan's office. The way Vanessa adjusted her outfit, smoothing out wrinkles with a smug little smile, made Adriana's stomach churn, heart pounding. Adriana approached. "Vanessa," she began, voice trembling with a fury she struggled to contain. "I need to speak with you." Vanessa's eyes flared with surprise before sliding into an icy glare. "Mrs. Harrington, how can I help?" she asked, in a tone dripping with false politeness. Adriana steeled herself. "I see how you behave around my husband. Whatever your intentions are, I suggest you stop before you embarrass yourself or—" Vanessa's laugh was low and mocking. "Embarrass myself? You really have no idea who you're dealing with, do you?" Before Adriana could respond, Nathan emerged from his office. He glanced between the two women, clearly alarmed at the confrontation. Adriana could barely speak for fear of what she might say or do. Nathan took Vanessa's side immediately, placing a comforting hand on her shoulder. "Adriana, stop this," he snapped, anger flashing in his eyes. "Vanessa is here for work. You're out of line." To stand there, pregnant and vulnerable, watching her husband choose this woman's side over hers, shattered something inside Adriana. She turned on her heel and walked away, tears burning her eyes. In that moment, betrayal sank its claws into her heart, and she vowed to protect herself and her unborn child, no matter the cost. Days passed in a haze of tension. Adriana avoided Nathan as much as possible. Their once lively bedroom was now a silent battleground. She found solace talking to her brother, Mark Greenwood, who had come to visit from Chicago. Mark noticed the shift in Adriana's demeanor immediately. Over coffee in the sunroom, she poured out her suspicions, Nathan's increasing coldness, Vanessa's bold intrusion, and the strange, threatening messages. Mark's brow furrowed. "You need to be careful, Adriana. You're carrying his heir, and that might put a target on your back." She nodded, thankful to have at least one person who believed her. That same evening, Adriana settled into her room early, desperate for rest. She found a note slipped under her door. This time, it was a typed message. "You won't stand in my way forever. One misstep, and everything you have will crumble." Heart pounding, she tucked the note in her nightstand. Sleep was elusive. Around midnight, she rose to get a glass of water from the kitchen. The mansion was dark, lit only by faint security lights. As she carefully descended the spiral staircase, a soft sound footsteps echoed behind her. A sudden push between her shoulder blades sent her tumbling forward. Time slowed. Adriana's scream tore through the stillness as her body pitched down the stairs. She landed in a heap at the bottom, a sharp pain radiating through her abdomen, her vision blurred, her breath coming in ragged gasps. Footsteps rushed away, disappearing into the shadows. She tried to call out for help, but her voice was choked by anguish and fear. Her fingers trembled as she cradled her belly, desperate to sense movement from the baby. Terror seized her heart. In that moment, Adriana knew this wasn't an accident. Someone wanted her, and possibly her child, gone. When Adriana regained consciousness, she found herself in a hospital bed. The antiseptic smell, the beeping machines, and the hushed voices of nurses filled the white-walled room. Her world felt suspended in a fog of pain and heartbreak. Mark sat beside her, his eyes rimmed red, a silent testament to the tragedy that had unfolded. "What happened?" Adriana asked weakly, though she already knew. Her hand instinctively went to her belly. It felt different, empty somehow. A wave of dread crashed over her. Mark swallowed hard. There was an accident," he murmured, tears glistening. "The doctors, they couldn't save your baby." The words struck like a physical blow, stealing the air from her lungs. Adriana let out a guttural sob, arms folded across her abdomen, as if to hold on to what was no longer there. The agony was almost unbearable. Memories of the unborn child, the tiny heartbeat she had cherished, flooded her mind. She felt as though she were dying inside. Then, unbidden, came the burning question, who pushed her? She was sure it wasn't just a misstep. Someone had pushed her down those stairs. Despite her grief, anger and resolve replaced her tears. She looked around for Nathan, expecting him to be at her side, overwhelmed with remorse. But he was absent, adding a fresh edge to her heartbreak. Mark explained that Nathan had been there briefly but left after the doctor delivered the devastating news. Adriana clenched her fists. The emptiness in her womb and the hollowness in her heart became an intolerable ache. She vowed to find out who had stolen her child's life and to make them pay. Her world was shattered, but a fierce determination kindled like an ember amid the wreckage, promising that she would not stop until the truth was laid bare. Adriana spent 2 days in the hospital, undergoing tests and healing from the bruises and internal trauma. Yet the emotional wound was the most gaping. The doctors recommended counseling to handle the loss of her baby, but she felt no desire to open up to a stranger when her own husband seemed so cold and distant. Nathan visited on the second evening, a mere half-hour cameo. He stood by the door, arms folded, posture stiff. He offered rote sympathy, never once meeting her eyes with genuine remorse. Instead, he focused on the unfortunate accident and how it might affect the family's reputation. Adriana was appalled. "Our reputation? What about our child?" she demanded, her voice cracking under the weight of fresh grief. "We lost our baby, Nathan." Nathan's gaze flickered away. "I know this is difficult, Adriana, but we can try again. You're young." His words lacked warmth, almost as if he'd rehearsed them. She stared at him, shock and heartbreak intertwining. Could this be the same man she once adored? The weight of betrayal pressed on her chest. Someone had pushed her, stolen their child's life, and he was acting as if it were a trivial setback. Before leaving, Nathan dropped a final blow. "Mother has arranged for a caretaker to look after you at home. Focus on recovering. I need to handle business matters. Vanessa has stepped in to manage some urgent tasks, so I'll be busy." The mention of Vanessa drove a sharpened spike of pain into Adriana's heart. It was as if the mistress had become more important than a grieving wife. Once he left, Adriana let out a trembling breath. Reality was stark. She had lost her baby, and the one person who should grieve alongside her seemed utterly indifferent. Slowly, she closed her eyes, and a single thought reverberated through her mind: find the truth, no matter what it takes. Upon her return to the Harrington estate, Adriana found the air thick with tension. Lucy Harrington hovered in the foyer, eyes skimming over Adriana's bandaged arm and bruised face with a fleeting hint of pity. Yet Lucy said nothing about the baby, offering no condolences for the grandchild she had lost. Instead, she ushered Adriana up to her bedroom and reiterated the doctor's orders to rest. Confined to her room, Adriana's isolation was punctuated by visits from a private nurse Lucy had hired. The nurse was polite but distant. Although Adriana appreciated her care, she felt caged in a place that had once been her home. After a week, Adriana discovered a stroke of luck. The household staff seemed to sympathize with her plight. Late one night, a maid named Rosalie slipped into Adriana's room to deliver dinner and quietly confided that the staff whispered about the push on the stairs. Some believed it was an intruder. Others were certain someone within the mansion was responsible. But mention of a confrontation between Adriana and Vanessa had fueled intense speculation. "Miss S. Harrington," Rosalie said softly, glancing over her shoulder as if expecting eavesdroppers. "I didn't see anything myself, but I heard from the butler that Miss Bloom was seen coming down the servants' stairs around the same time you fell." Adriana's pulse quickened. She pressed Rosalie for details, but the maid had none to offer. Still, the implication was enough to ignite Adriana's suspicions like wildfire. Vanessa had been in the house that night, lurking around in restricted corridors. In a mansion brimming with secrets, Adriana realized that loyalty was a currency more valuable than gold. The staff's silent support could be her key to finding the truth and exposing the darkness festering at the heart of the Harrington family. Determined to uncover who had pushed her, Adriana requested a meeting with Detective Lisa Parker, a local officer who had once handled minor security matters for the wealthy families in Greenwich. Lucy balked at the idea, insisting that the fall was an accident, but Adriana was not swayed. She needed answers, and she refused to be silenced. Detective Parker arrived quietly one afternoon, dressed in plain clothes so as not to arouse suspicion. Over tea in Adriana's private sitting room, she listened attentively, taking down notes as Adriana recounted every detail she remembered her nightly trip to the kitchen. The sudden shove, the sound of hurried footsteps fleeing the scene. "Is there anyone you suspect?" Parker asked delicately. Adriana hesitated. She was uncertain if Lucy was complicit or if the blame lay solely on Vanessa. Perhaps it was even someone else altogether, someone protecting the family's fortune. "I believe it could be Vanessa Bloom," she finally admitted, voice trembling. "She's my husband's friend, and she was seen wandering around that night." Detective Parker nodded, though her face gave little away. She promised to do her best to investigate discreetly. Despite her vow, Adriana sensed the odds were stacked against any thorough inquiry. The Harrington name carried immense influence in local circles. Money and power often muffled any scandal. As Detective Parker left, Adriana gazed out the window at the sweeping lawns of the estate. She remembered her father's wise counsel when faced with a locked door: look for a window. She might have to open every window in the Harrington world to uncover the truth. Unbeknownst to Adriana, Lucy and Nathan were watching from a distance, their expressions grim. To them, Adriana's insistence on calling the police threatened the family's reputation. And to Vanessa, it spelled war. The estate felt suffocating, so Adriana sought refuge at a nearby cafe in Greenwich, one that her father used to frequent. She invited her brother, Mark, and her friend, Serena Parker, to meet her there. Both arrived promptly, concern etched on their faces. They listened intently as Adriana detailed her meeting with Detective Lisa Parker. "I'm worried that the detective can only do so much," she confessed, voice quavering. "Nathan's influence reaches far, and he doesn't seem the least bit interested in helping me find out who pushed me." Serena tapped her manicured nails on the table, her eyes narrowing. "I can hire a private investigator. My boss's husband, George Walters, runs a reputable firm in New York. They're discreet and thorough. If anyone can dig into Vanessa's background, it's them." Hope fluttered in Adriana's chest. She squeezed Serena's hand. "That might be exactly what I need." Mark leaned forward, his tone grave. "We need concrete proof, Adriana. A push down the stairs could be an attempted murder charge. Whoever did this took your child's life. This isn't just about money or secrets anymore. This is about justice for your baby." A lump formed in Adriana's throat, but she nodded. Fury simmered beneath her sorrow. "Whatever it takes," she whispered. Over the next few days, Serena made arrangements for George Walters to begin a quiet investigation. Meanwhile, Mark promised to stay in Greenwich for as long as Adriana needed him. Their unwavering support offered Adriana a glimmer of stability in a world that felt like it was collapsing. Reinvigorated by the alliance forming around her, Adriana steeled herself for what was to come. It was time to lift the veil on every lie, every secret hidden within the Harrington name, no matter the cost. While the private investigation got underway, Adriana continued to endure the tense atmosphere at home. Lucy's disapproving glares, Vanessa's smug appearances, and Nathan's frigid indifference formed a silent trio of hostility that seemed to grow stronger by the day. Late one night, Adriana found herself restless again. She tiptoed through the mansion's dark corridors, drawn by the flicker of light streaming from under Lucy's study door. Pressing her ear against the polished wood, she could hear raised voices, Lucy and Nathan, apparently locked in an argument. "She's making a spectacle of this," Lucy hissed. "Can't you control your wife?" The detective's presence has everyone talking. Nathan's reply came in a quiet, angry tone. "I've tried, Mother. She's determined. But we can't have our name dragged through a murder investigation." A shiver shot down Adriana's spine. So they did fear the possibility of a murder investigation. She inched away from the door, not wanting to hear more, but unable to stop listening. Lucy continued, voice trembling with rage. "And what about Vanessa? Her reputation is at stake too, Nathan. She's been good for you, for the company. Your father would never stand for this family being torn apart by scandal." Adriana stifled a gasp. The words were a stark admission of Lucy's preference for Vanessa's well-being over Adriana's heartbreak. It was horrifying to confirm the suspicion that Lucy supported her son's affair, or at least tolerated it for business reasons. Steadying herself, Adriana crept back to her room. As her heart thudded, she couldn't shake the feeling that Lucy, Nathan, and Vanessa were all entangled in something far darker than just an affair. Their conversation suggested they knew more than they let on, and perhaps Lucy was even orchestrating ways to protect her precious family legacy, regardless of the cost to Adriana's life. The next afternoon, Serena delivered surprising news from the private investigator, George Walters. He had dug up information about Vanessa Bloom's past that painted a far different picture than the polished financial consultant facade she presented. Over a secure phone call, George relayed the findings. Vanessa Bloom isn't her real name. She was born Vanessa Torre in a small town in upstate New York. She changed her name after she married. He paused, flipping through notes. A wealthy businessman named Vincent Bloom. Their marriage ended under suspicious circumstances when he died in a boating accident. Vanessa inherited a hefty sum, fueling her subsequent entry into high-end business consulting. Adriana's blood ran cold. "Suspicious circumstances?" she asked, voice barely above a whisper. George sighed. The official report was an accident, but local rumors suggested foul play. The case was never reopened, though. With money and connections, Vanessa seems to have navigated those waters unscathed. Adriana exchanged worried glances with Serena and Mark. Was Vanessa capable of murder? Could she truly have orchestrated the push that caused Adriana's miscarriage? The possibility that Vanessa had a history of targeting wealthy men, removing obstacles, and walking away with fortunes was terrifying. "What do we do with this?" Adriana asked, her voice trembling. "We gather more evidence," George replied firmly. "We need proof that ties her to your fall. But this background suggests a motive, especially if she sees you as standing in her path to a share of Nathan's fortune." Adriana's thoughts whirled. Vanessa might not just be a mistress with an eye on a wealthy man. She could be a killer. Adriana's resolve hardened further. She silently thanked her father's legacy of caution and cunning, traits she now realized were essential in the face of such insidious danger. She would not be silenced. Not this time, not ever again. As if sensing the walls closing in, Lucy Harrington suddenly made a show of kindness toward Adriana. She insisted on hosting a grand dinner at the estate, inviting a select group of high-profile guests, including some prominent local politicians and business moguls. Lucy claimed it was to help Adriana reintroduce herself to society after her tragic loss. But Adriana suspected it was more about smoke and mirrors, an attempt to bury the scandal under a facade of normalcy. Despite her grief, Adriana dressed in a simple black gown, the color reflecting her somber mood. She circulated among the guests, her smile forced, her heart far away. As the evening wore on, she noticed Lucy pulling Vanessa aside in a corner of the room, whispering with an air of conspiracy. Mark, ever vigilant, approached Adriana with a drink. "They're cooking something up," he said grimly. "I can see it in their eyes." Adriana nodded, lips pressed thin. She excused herself and slipped closer to eavesdrop on Lucy and Vanessa's hushed exchange. Although the crowd's chatter drowned out most words, she caught fragments public perception, keep her quiet, and the will. Her heart pounded. The Harrington estate, the fortune, and Nathan's inheritance were apparently at the center of this scheme. As Lucy turned away, the glint in her eyes suggested a depth of manipulation that chilled Adriana. At dinner, Lucy raised a toast to family unity and healing, but the sentiment rang hollow. Nathan, seated next to Vanessa, lifted his glass with mechanical politeness. The tension at the table was palpable. Adriana locked eyes with Vanessa, and an unsettling smile curved across the mistress's lips. It was a silent dare, an unspoken challenge. Adriana felt her anger burn, forging her determination to protect what was left of her life and seek justice for the child she lost. Days after the dinner, the mansion felt more stifling than ever. Adriana's grief and rage grew with each passing hour. She had reached the point where the only way to survive was to confront Nathan directly, to demand answers he'd so far avoided giving. She found him in his office, dictating something into a recorder, legal documents spread across his polished mahogany desk. With a trembling voice, she stepped inside, closing the door behind her. "Nathan, we need to talk," she began, her tone steady despite the storm in her chest. He paused, removing his reading glasses. About what? His eyes held the same distant glaze she'd grown to despise. Adriana forced herself to remain calm. "Someone pushed me down those stairs," she said, each word measured. "And I lost our child. I can't believe you're not more interested in finding out who did it." Nathan exhaled, pinching the bridge of his nose. "You're imagining conspiracies, Adriana. The police ruled it as an accident." "They did not," she interrupted, frustration boiling over. "Detective Parker hasn't closed the case. I just spoke with her this morning. It was partly a lie. She had spoken to the detective, but Parker said little about whether the case was still active. However, it was enough to rattle Nathan. His jaw clenched. "Look, I'm trying to protect this family from a scandal. Maybe you slipped. You were tired and grieving." It's not uncommon. The crack in Adriana's composure finally split wide open. "Stop treating me like a fragile liar," she snapped, tears of anger spilling over. "I know you're having an affair with Vanessa. I know there's more to her than meets the eye. If you won't help me uncover the truth, then you're part of the problem." Nathan's face hardened, his silence a confirmation of her worst fears. Adriana turned away, her heart pounding. She couldn't rely on him anymore. This was war, and she would fight it alone if she had to. Armed with George Walters's preliminary findings on Vanessa, Adriana resumed her discussions with Detective Parker. She handed over the documents detailing Vanessa's past, explaining the suspicious circumstances surrounding her former husband's death. Detective Parker's eyes narrowed as she read through the files. "This certainly paints Miss Bloom in a troubling light," Parker acknowledged. "But I need concrete evidence linking her to your fall." Adriana nodded, her expression resolute. "I understand. Just promise me you'll keep digging." Once the detective departed, Adriana paced the length of her room, frustration gnawing at her. She wanted immediate justice, but the legal process was slow and methodical, especially where the Harrington name was concerned. Her phone buzzed. An unfamiliar number displayed on the screen. She answered hesitantly, bracing for another threat. Instead, a low, male voice spoke. "Mrs. Harrington? It's Dr. Anthony Wexler, a colleague of Dr. Megan Ross. I need to speak with you regarding your medical files." Surprise flashed through Adriana. What's this about? The call was brief but left Adriana with a new thread to pull. Dr. Wexler had discovered an inconsistency in her hospital records, something about how her injuries had been documented. He insisted on meeting in person, away from the prying eyes of the Harrington estate. Later that evening, Adriana slipped out with Mark and Serena at her side. They met Dr. Wexler at a small clinic on the outskirts of town. There, he revealed that the severity of Adriana's injuries suggested a deliberate act of violence rather than a mere slip. He also hinted that someone had tried to alter or hide parts of her medical documentation, presumably to downplay the possibility of assault. The revelation hit Adriana like a jolt of electricity. Someone was actively covering up the crime. Now more than ever, Adriana knew she was on the right path. She just hoped she could survive it. Amid the chaos, a letter arrived from the Harrington family attorney. It stated that the old Harrington Trust Fund, a massive portion of the estate's wealth, was set to be restructured. The letter invited Adriana to meet at the law firm's office the following week. Curiously, the letter mentioned that Nathan intended to modify his will, citing recent family developments. Alarm bells rang in Adriana's mind. If Nathan was changing his will right after she lost their child, it could only mean one thing: the Harrington family was protecting their assets from her. The sudden push to rearrange the inheritance could even suggest that Lucy and Nathan believed Adriana might not remain in the picture for long. Fueled by dread, Adriana discussed the matter with Mark. He frowned, tapping the letter. They might be trying to cut you out of any inheritance, especially now that there's no baby involved. The possibility sent a chill through Adriana. She recalled the conversation she'd overheard between Lucy and Vanessa about the will. This was the final piece of the puzzle, linking the push on the stairs to a financial motive. If Vanessa became Nathan's new wife, or Lucy's favored partner for him, she could inherit part of the Harrington empire. Adriana, in their eyes, was an inconvenience. Anger burned through her grief. "I won't let them do this," she declared fiercely. "My father taught me to fight for what's rightfully mine. They may have cost me my child, but they won't steal my future." In the days leading up to the meeting at the law firm, Adriana prepared herself. She consulted her own lawyer, arranged for George Walters to keep a close watch on Vanessa, and prayed that the detective would find enough evidence to bring the truth to light before the Harringtons executed their final, ruthless plan. Adriana's heart drummed a furious beat against her ribs as she stepped into the sleek, glass-walled lobby of Davis and Hemsworth, the Harrington family's long-standing law firm. High above her, steel rafters crisscrossed the ceiling, giving the space a cathedral-like hush. She clutched the folder containing George Walters's investigative findings close to her chest, steeling herself for the confrontation that lay ahead. A junior associate guided her through a maze of corridors into a spacious conference room. The plush carpeting muted her footsteps, and the faint scent of polished wood and expensive cologne hung in the air. She spotted Nathan seated at one end of a long mahogany table, with Lucy perched at his right side. Their postures were equally rigid, as though they had rehearsed how to maintain composure. A tall stack of legal documents waited before them, overseen by Franklin Dyson, the family's formidable attorney. Across from them sat Marjorie Carter, Adriana's own legal counsel. Marjorie was a seasoned attorney known for her calm tenacity in the face of intimidation. She offered a slight nod of encouragement as Adriana took her seat. "Welcome," Franklin Dyson said in a measured tone. He wore a crisp navy suit, and his eyes flicked from Adriana's face to the documents she hugged protectively. "We're here to discuss the trust, restructuring, and Mr. Harrington's revised will. Let's begin." Nathan cleared his throat. "Yes, I intend to allocate certain assets differently," he began, though his voice lacked its usual confidence. His gaze flickered toward his mother, who offered him a terse nod. In light of recent events, he continued, we believe it's prudent to ensure that Harrington Industries and our family holdings remain on stable footing. Adriana fought to keep her temper in check. A swirl of anger, grief, and betrayal surged within her. Is that how they were framing this? An act of prudence? She could almost see the calculations running through Lucy's mind, how to protect the family name, how to keep Adriana from any real power or wealth. The memory of her fall and the precious life she had lost simmered just beneath her composure. As the discussion moved into legal jargon, Lucy cut in with the precision of a hawk. We all know the situation has been difficult, but we must do what's necessary to maintain the Harrington legacy. This restructuring is not meant to harm anyone. It's simply what is best for the estate. Marjorie leaned forward, her voice cool. Miss S. Harrington Adriana deserves to know the specifics of these changes. She's been a part of this family, and until recently, she was carrying its heir. Revisions to the will under such circumstances merit thorough explanation. Lucy's expression hardened. Circumstances change. We can't dwell on tragedies forever. Something in Adriana snapped at those words. The mention of her miscarriage, brushed aside as a mere tragedy, made her press her fingernails into her palms until it hurt. She drew a slow, steadying breath before speaking. I appreciate we're all here to discuss financial matters, but I won't ignore what happened to me and to my child. A flicker of annoyance crossed Franklin Dyson's face. Miss S. Harrington, he said carefully, we sympathize with your loss. However, these proceedings are strictly about estate management. Perhaps we should focus. No, Adriana interrupted, her voice low and resolute. She placed the folder on the table and slid it towards Dyson. This is about far more than money. There is a criminal investigation into my fall, and I have reason to believe it wasn't an accident. Inside that folder is evidence of Miss Vanessa Bloom's disturbing past and details pointing to a deliberate attempt to harm me. A heavy silence descended over the room. Lucy's spine went rigid, and Nathan paled, his carefully practiced facade cracking at the edges. Dyson hesitated, then reached for the folder, flipping through its contents with a growing frown. Adriana continued, her voice gaining strength. I want it documented here, in front of my attorney and yours, that I suspect someone in this family, or associated with it, orchestrated that push. If anything else happens to me, I want my concerns on record. I won't be silenced. Lucy tried to mask her discomfort with a brittle laugh. You're paranoid, Adriana. This is outrageous. Marjorie calmly cut her off. We won't engage in name-calling, Mrs. Harrington. My client is exercising her right to protect herself. Given the gravity of her suspicions, it's entirely appropriate to raise them now, especially as you move to alter financial arrangements that could disadvantage her. Nathan opened his mouth, but no words came out. His gaze kept drifting to the folder. Page after page, Dyson's eyes widened, particularly at the portions about Vanessa's previous marriage and the suspicious circumstances of her husband's death. Lucy made a show of rolling her shoulders back. This is a smear campaign. Vanessa is a consummate professional. She's done valuable work for Harrington Industries, professional or not, Adriana interjected. She's got secrets, and I believe her secrets have cost me my child. Another tense stillness filled the space. Each breath Adriana drew felt heavy with the weight of all she had endured and all she now risked by confronting the Harringtons in their own stronghold. Dyson cleared his throat, placing the folder down carefully. These allegations are serious, he admitted, his usual crisp tone betraying a hint of unease. If there's an active police investigation, we may need to pause any drastic changes to the will until the matter is resolved. Nathan's face fell. He seemed torn, glancing at Lucy for reassurance, but Lucy offered none, only a severe, icy glare. At last, he dragged his gaze to Adriana. His voice was barely above a whisper. I never wanted it to go this far, he said, though his words held no comfort. Adriana found no solace in his lukewarm confession. She rose to her feet, meeting Lucy's stare head-on. "I won't allow you to bully me out of my rights or bury the truth about what happened. My child deserves justice, and I won't rest until I get it." With that, she turned on her heel and strode from the conference room, Marjorie close behind. Her heart hammered, but a fierce sense of validation swelled within her. She had done it, spoken her truth in the lion's den. Behind her, she could almost hear the cracks forming in the Harringtons' carefully constructed fortress of power, each tiny fracture inching them closer to a day of reckoning. In the corridor, she exchanged a look of grim satisfaction with Marjorie. Though the battle was far from over, Adriana felt a surge of renewed purpose. Fear still lingered in her veins, but so did a quiet exhilaration. She was no longer alone, and now the Harringtons knew she would not go quietly into the shadows. That single act of courage would reshape the entire game, and as Adriana walked away, she sensed the tide beginning to turn in her favor, each step resonating with a small but vital victory. That very evening, chaos erupted at the Harrington estate. Word spread quickly that Adriana had gone public, at least in a legal context, with her suspicions. Under George Walters's guidance, she'd also provided statements to Detective Parker. The local press, always eager for high society scandals, caught wind of brewing conflict within the Harrington empire. Nathan confronted Adriana in their once shared bedroom, eyes ablaze with a mixture of rage and desperation. "You've humiliated me," he seethed, slamming the door behind him. "My name is in every gossip column, and the board is questioning my judgment." Adriana faced him calmly. "You humiliated yourself by bringing Vanessa into our marriage," she said, voice steady despite her trembling hands. "By ignoring our child's death and covering up a crime. I won't be silent anymore." He advanced, fists clenched, but then stopped as if seeing her in a new light. "I never wanted this," he muttered, his anger seemingly deflated by a flicker of guilt. "You don't understand what Mother expects of me, what the Harrington name demands." In another corner of the mansion, Lucy raged at the household staff, threatening to fire anyone who dared speak to the press. She made frantic phone calls, possibly to political connections, trying to quash the whispers of an attempted murder. Yet the story had already seeped through the gilded walls. As the tension mounted, Adriana felt both terrified and resolute. She refused to be a victim any longer. She had proof of Vanessa's suspicious past, the tampered medical records, and enough reason to believe Lucy's manipulations were part of a bigger plot. If justice was to be served, it might tear the Harrington family apart. In the darkest recesses of Adriana's heart, she wondered if Nathan had any capacity left to redeem himself, or if he was too deeply ensnared in Lucy's control to ever stand by her side again. A few weeks later, a storm of legal battles and sensational headlines descended on the Harrington family like a relentless hurricane. Under pressure from the authorities and facing a swirl of public scrutiny, Nathan was forced to acknowledge that Vanessa Bloom had a more extensive role in his life than he initially admitted. In hushed confessions behind closed doors, Nathan finally revealed to Detective Parker that Vanessa had threatened him, using blackmail over certain fraudulent business dealings within Harrington Industries. This revelation shifted suspicion onto Vanessa, culminating in a formal investigation. Detective Parker and her team gathered statements from staff members and leveraged George Walters's findings, unearthing enough evidence to arrest Vanessa on charges of conspiracy and possible attempted murder. Though the case was still ongoing, Vanessa's arrest brought a semblance of resolution to the mansion's dark chapter. Lucy retreated from public life, her reputation tarnished by suggestions that she had encouraged or at least tolerated the affair to secure business alliances. She cut a reclusive figure in the estate's east wing, consumed by the knowledge that her thirst for power had contributed to a tragedy that claimed her grandchild's life. As for Nathan, the scandal forced him to confront his moral failings. In a rare moment of humility, he approached Adriana with tears in his eyes, apologizing for his indifference, his betrayal, and for failing to protect her or their unborn child. She listened, her emotions tangled between lingering anger, deep sorrow, and a flicker of pity for the man she once loved. Yet Adriana had come too far to simply fall back under his sway. She decided to file for divorce, determined to forge a new life free from Harrington manipulations. In reclaiming her freedom, she honored the memory of the child she lost and found the courage to live for herself. 6 months later, Adriana stood outside the Greenwich courthouse, a final decree in her hands. The divorce was granted. The once mighty Harrington empire had been rocked by scandal, with ongoing legal cases against both Vanessa and key associates who aided in covering up her alleged crimes. Though Nathan avoided jail time, he was left to pick up the pieces of a shattered reputation and a fragile business. Adriana reflected on her journey, a tale of heartbreak, betrayal, and resolve. She had lost her child, confronted a mistress bent on seizing fortune, and faced a powerful family that sought to silence her at every turn. In the end, she emerged with her dignity and a renewed sense of self-worth. She chose to channel her pain into a new purpose, establishing a charity in her child's memory aimed at supporting vulnerable pregnant women. Mark remained her unwavering pillar of support, while Serena Parker continued working alongside the private investigator, ensuring justice would be served against Vanessa. Detective Parker, having proven her integrity, rose in rank and became a respected figure in local law enforcement circles. On a brisk morning, Adriana took a deep breath of the cold air and walked toward her car. The future was uncharted territory, but she felt hopeful. She would always carry the memory of her lost child, but she also carried an indomitable spirit forged by heartbreak and tempered by determination. A phone buzz interrupted her thoughts. It was Serena, reminding her about a meeting for the new charity. Adriana smiled, the warmth in her heart something she hadn't felt for a long time. With each step forward, she chose life, and in doing so, honored the precious love she had nurtured, albeit briefly, within her. Thank you for journeying through this tumultuous tale of ambition, betrayal, and a mother's courage in the face of unimaginable loss. Adriana Harrington's fight for justice reminds us that even in the darkest moments, resilience can lead to redemption, and that no amount of wealth can overshadow the power of truth. We hope you've been captivated by each twist and turn in this real-life drama fiction. If you found yourself moved by Adriana's perseverance, stunned by the layers of deception, or inspired by the possibility of new beginnings, we invite you to share this video. Let's keep the conversation going about the importance of standing up against betrayal and refusing to be silenced. If you enjoyed this story, please like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us bring you more gripping narratives that shine a light on the strength of the human spirit.